That's number 999 or 1000 or something.
Oh,
Frank
jeez.
Stritto talking about movies.
Frank, say hi to Josh DeVoe, filmmaker.
Josh DeVoe, filmmaker, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you, Frank?
I'm fine. Joe, I knew you'd be calling a little late because I was reading up and you've got an interesting guest, so I knew the conversation would flow.
And it's going to flow again because you're here.
Okay.
Phantom of the Opera, 25, you're right.
1925, Phantom of the Opera, a silent movie, and the most famous movie of Lon Chaney Sr. And it was made in
Singer
had
Clarence
troubled
Brook
history. It
Jr.
was made
died
in late
Sunday,
24, and they kept going back for reshooting. Chaney and the director hated each other, so Chaney actually directed some scenes, and yada 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 was well on its way to being a mess. Somehow they pulled it out, and it became a big hit. And this is a time when America, I don't know what, Joe, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, I don't know what happened on that line there. American cinema is not making a lot of horror movies, and this is an horror movie. So it was a bit of an outsider, and the people loved it. There was no real follow-up, though. I mean, Chaney had made this movie for Universal, and then before it came out, he had moved over to MGM, where he was under contract. So he never made a movie for anybody but MGM after 1925. So if Universal had wanted to follow it up, they were going to have to find another horror star or another star. And they really weren't thinking in terms of horror movies in those days. I don't think it was ever described as a horror movie until much later. And let's see, we've often talked on this show, Joe, about people that you show a lot of silent movies, and so many of them didn't make it into sound. This movie's made 1925, about 2 years before the big breakthrough in sound, but about 4 years before silent movies would be dead. And almost nobody in this movie had a career that survived that. Chaney died in 1930. He would have survived just fine as far as we know. He only made one sound film. Mary Filman, the leading lady, was 21. She was doing fine, but when sound came in, she was out. She would live in seclusion for another 60 years, but she was out of movies by 1929. She was still 27. The romantic lead, Norman Carey, the same story. He's 30 years old. He'll make 6 sound films before he calls it quits. And the director was pretty much out of the business when sound came in. So sound did not do good things for the casting here. For people who have not seen this movie, you have to watch it just to see the unmasking scene. It's one of the most famous scenes in American film, one of the most famous scenes in horror movies. And this is where... Chaney, you don't see much of him for the first quarter of the movie or so. He's just mainly in shadows. And we're well into the movie before we get to see the Phantom of the Opera's face. Now, people who haven't seen the movie have probably seen his makeup because it is so iconic. But you have to see the unmasking scene. And Mary Filman, the leading lady, supposedly her reaction to his face is real because legend says she had no idea what he would look like in the makeup, and that may well be true because there was a lot of publicity, a lot of non-publicity, keeping it under wraps. They didn't want people to see it. It was hard. I don't know if there were any photographs of Chaney in makeup available before the movie actually came out. So it may well be her reaction. And the genius of the masking scene is you get to see it twice. She pulls his mask off from behind, so she doesn't see his face, and we do. So that's unmasking one, and then he turns around and looks at her, and then you see her reaction. So watch it. Even if people aren't into this movie or whatever, watch it.
And who directed that scene? Was that Lon Chaney directing, or...
We'll never know, but I'm pretty sure it would have been Chaney directing himself because it wasn't too far along before he and the director couldn't stand to be in the same room together. So
Who was the director again?
The director's name was Rupert Julian. He's one of these guys he was a New Zealander. Not a lot of New Zealanders in American silent movies. And he had been around from the beginning, so he had done everything. He had acted, he had written, he had produced, and he directed. And his big claim to fame is he was a dead ringer for Kaiser Wilhelm II. So during World War II, he went from one movie after another to playing the Kaiser. And if you look him up on the International Movie Database, IMDb, they've got a picture of him there. And if you know what Kaiser Wilhelm looks like, you say, God, that could easily be confused with Kaiser Wilhelm.
Are we sure it wasn't Kaiser himself?
It might have been, maybe. Well, the Kaiser was supposedly living in retirement in Holland, but maybe he had a double life directing Phantom of the Opera. Maybe that's why Chaney couldn't get along with him. I don't know.
We'll never know.
We'll never know. Why is this movie in the public domain? This is one of the most famous movies in the world, and it's in the public domain. You have to get the lawyers in on that, but Universal, this is 1925. Universal came back in 1929 and they did film some new scenes, but they recut it. They put in dialogue. Chaney wasn't working for them, so they couldn't use Chaney's voice, but they got the Norman Carey and Mary Philbin, the romantic leads, to come in and add dialogue to their scenes. And my guess is the reason this is in the public domain is because with universal copyright, and in those days you had to keep renewing your copyright, not like today where you do something and it's copyrighted for 99 years or so. You had to keep renewing it. So my guess is they renewed on the 1929 version, but never renewed on the 1925 version. That fell into the public domain. But again, you'll have to get the lawyers in on that because I'm not an expert on what makes things public domain and what not.
So the talkie version is probably a universal classic that they keep under the wraps.
Yeah, I mean, well, if you watch the two side by side, the 1929 version, which there's two versions of it. There's silent and there's a version with some talking scenes, and the reason they did that is in 1929, a lot of theaters hadn't rewired for sound yet, so you needed silent and sound versions if you wanted to do both, and when I say that it's not silent, there's talking scenes, there's sound scenes, but it's primarily a silent movie with a musical score. So
another 20 seconds, Frank.
Oh, another 20 seconds. Okay. That's about it for this movie. It is a classic. You wish Chaney had made more like it, and keep an eye on TCM because they often play Chaney movies, and he is an actor to watch. And you'll get some of that in this movie, but he was a very versatile actor, played different kinds of roles. Unappreciated today because he's mainly remembered for his heavy makeup roles, but he did a lot more. Joe, I'll talk to you next.
I'll try to get you the movie tomorrow for next week.
You.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
And that's Frank Dello Stritto. Great intellect. Tomorrow night's the movie Phantom of the Opera, 9 o'clock. The views and opinions on visual radio are those of Joe Vig. His guest, Josh Javot. His guest, Frank Dello Stritto. Not necessarily those of Jay Gold and WinCAM and Sean O'Brien and all the people here. Hey, see you out there on Saturday for Winchester Day. This is Visual Radio. We've got a lot of guests coming up. Steve Hunter will be on soon. Stay tuned. Good night.